My name is Devin Shaw, and I'm a youth representative with the Hyde Jazz Festival. Today, I'm presenting our hashtag Tuesday Talks, a series of interviews with musicians who have performed at the Hyde Jazz Festival either this year or in past years. Today's guest is saxophonist, composer, and educator Sharel Cassity. Ms. Cassity, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Very excited to be here with you today.
Yes, me too. Thanks for having me.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Can you tell us what your musical background is when you started playing sax?
Sure. I started playing saxophone at 9, but before that, I'd been playing piano since I was 6. And I come from a musical family. My dad's side is very musical. My aunt is a concert pianist. My dad also plays Hammond B3 organ and trumpet, French horn, and piano. And and he's very talented. He's got perfect pitch and a photogenic memory. So when I was growing up, he was playing in the club 6 nights a week.
Oh, wow.
And I wanted to play an instrument. I saw him have a trio. He played with Louis Bellson one night trio,
Okay.
and I saw a tenor sax. So when I was 8, I started begging for a saxophone.
Hmm.
So they had divorced when I was 3, and I lived in I moved around a lot. I moved 13 different times before I was 12,
It's crazy.
but I just clung to the saxophone, and that's what I wanted to do was play the saxophone.
Wow.
I started out in classical saxophone lessons at the age of 9 because my dad had a colleague at the university he worked at the time. And so he got me really great saxophone lessons. And I was on a classical track for about 5 years. And then I just decided I wanted to play jazz. So when I would visit him, I would raid his record collection. Like he had
Oh,
the
okay.
records, a shelf of records.
Yeah.
And his school was 10 minutes away. It wasn't far. So he would just leave me at home and tell me to practice all day, which I did a lot of practicing, but I would rate his records and listen to Coltrane and Bird and all kinds of, even the Jazz Crusaders. As a kid, I really thought they were hip. You know
Yeah.
about them?
Of course, the Crusaders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Um, just anything. I would listen to all the stuff, Bill Evans, everything he had in his collection. And then I decided to play jazz when I was about 14.
Okay. So you kind of talked about what your influences are. I mean, who your main influences are.
Yeah.
Um, who would you say was like a mentor besides, I guess, your father and the people in your family? Like, who gave you your kind of break onto the jazz scene?
Well, when I got to high school, there was a kid in the neighborhood who played drums named David Bowen. And we rode the school bus together, and he scared me because he was always playing on the seat with his sticks, like, really angry and stuff. And and we were supposed to sit next to each other because of alphabetical order, Bowen and Cassity. So I was, always just kind of watching it. But he gave me these jazz tapes that they were mixtapes of Basie, Miles. I mean, Miles was on there, and just all
Wow.
kinds of
Yeah.
Cannonball at the Lighthouse. And I listened to those nonstop. I listened to the first track and I was hooked. And so we started to become friends. And then I started to make honor bands in Oklahoma, where I met other kids who were more serious about jazz.
Mhm.
And then, I would travel to different cities just to play with them.
That's pretty cool. How would you say, I mean, at what point, I understand going through honor bands is like a pretty serious act for a musician. It's like equivalent to like going all state for basketball or you know, being involved in sports at a very high level. But at what point did you decide that music was going to be like your profession or you're going to do this for the rest of your life?
Well, I think I knew that at 8. When people would ask me when I was a kid, I wasn't saying, oh, I want to be a dancer or a doctor. I would always say a musician. I just knew, for some reason, I always knew my future was to play music. That was
Mhm.
my calling. At the time, I thought it was classical pianist. So I was really serious about that. And, I won some competitions and played a whole bunch of classical piano. And then when I shifted into classical saxophone, I was real serious about that. And then, when I decided I was going to play jazz, that was pretty much it. And it was tough for people to understand that I wanted to play jazz. After having so many accomplishments in classical, they were worried that, what my future was going to be like to all of a sudden shift. But I made the decision because it called to me. The music, in a way, I'd say the music saved me in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
It helped me through a lot of times, and just it spoke to me in a way that other music wasn't able to.
Would you care to describe any of like the memorable moments in your life that involved music or any of the struggles that it kind of got you through?
Mm. It got me through a really rocky childhood. It got me through just growing up and not having a lot, all the
Mhm.
time. It wasn't until I got older that we started to have a stable, an environment that was pretty stable. So music was my best friend, and jazz at the time was what I clung to. I was very religious. I of course believed in God, but it was almost like a religion in itself, the music, because it was spiritual, and it reached a place, and especially when I went to New York. I went to New York completely unprepared with, $700 in my pocket, which I thought was a lot at the time.
Uh,
And knowing only one person, which was my childhood friend, David Bowen, which I mentioned earlier,
right.
only person I knew in New York. And I was there, and he left after 3 days to go work on some cruise ships. So then I was just kind of in New York. And to be honest, when I got there, the thing about it was that I had to be there because that's where the music was for me.
Yes.
At the time, I didn't know that there was this great Chicago scene, or I didn't know of any other great scenes. For me, when I walked down in Smalls for this first time and heard the music, that's where I felt like I belonged. But there was also some really rough times in New York, you
Mhm.
know, just sleeping on floors, and, not having places to stay, being locked out, and, losing my saxophone and all kinds of things, where if I had some headphones, I was okay.
Mhm.
If I could work it out musically, then I could figure out the next step.
So you'd say like through all these adversities and ups and downs, like as long as you could get to music, you knew everything was going to be okay. So really you relied on like honing into your passion, right?
Exactly. And I had a faith that if I was good enough at that, that it would lead me to the right places.
That's very good advice to like young musicians, even musicians who are on the scene right now trying to get through, especially with all this COVID stuff and the current social climate. Speaking of which, like, how have you been
Exactly.
adapting to this new climate socially as well as the COVID-19 situation?
I've been okay. I believe that music hasn't been affected. We've been affected, the scene has been affected, but the music hasn't changed at all. The music is what the music is. So the people who are really serious and love to play, they're going to love to play no matter whether there's gigs or not.
Right.
They're they're going to still be doing what they do. And if you call them 6 months from now, it doesn't matter if they've played a gig or not. They're going to show up and just kill it because they've been doing that at home. They've been doing that in their head. They do that because that's what they do. So, and then other people, maybe if they need the motivation of gigs and an audience to make them play, they might find something else that helps them sustain their life.
Hmm.
So I think it's good in a number of ways, but it has taught us that we can't rely on outside gigs and rely on an audience all of the time. So we do have to come up with something that's either super entertaining or a necessity.
Right. So given that I would assume you're one of the musicians who's going to play regardless of gigs. I mean,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, right? Uh,
Yeah.
do you have any upcoming projects that you'd like our audience to know about?
Well, I have a live stream coming up on October 3rd,
Hmm.
where I just recorded 2 days ago. I went to Cincinnati and recorded Bird with Strings with the Cincinnati
Oh
Symphony.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be cool to check out on Saturday, October 3rd.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't really have anything planned for the time live stream. Wise, I keep wanting to do a Jimmy Heath tribute. We'll see.
If I'm not mistaken, you did release an album recently, right? Or
Yeah, I did. That's right. Thank you. I released it in August, and it's called Fearless, and it features a band that I played with for many years, Mark Whitfield Jr. on drums, Alex Claffey on bass, Richard Johnson on piano. And it's a lot of originals, a couple standards that I arranged. It's doing okay right now.
All right. Sounds amazing. Sounds great. Do you have any advice for young musicians that you haven't given already? You've given quite a bit, but
Like I was saying, do what you love and stick to it, but also have a plan.
mhm,
It's best when those two things are matched. I got really lucky. I didn't really have a plan, but as I was hoping, music found me, the right people found me. That doesn't always happen. And it didn't happen for everything I wanted. And I think that I could have had more of what I was going for if I would have had a plan in
mhm,
place. So decide who you want to be and look up those people and really try to find out how to make their money, how they make their money.
mhm,
Do they just play? Do they teach? How did they get into the gigs that they got,
sure.
gigs that they're playing? Did they know someone? Were they discovered? Were they just, most often you'll find that there was either a link or a certain tactic that they had, and about the way they make their living. Most of the time you'll find that it's not just from playing jazz in this day and time. And that's sad to say, but most artists have had either a pop gig or they have a teaching job or
Mhm,
they do something on the side like real estate, something. And
yeah,
so you have a full picture in your mind of what to expect and what you want out of life. Now, if you just want to play, that's fine. But the people who are just playing for their life, they're sort of stuck in a time like this.
all right.
So you've got to plan for, these things can happen. And if you're single and young, and that might be okay now, but what about if you later have a family? Is
Mhm,
that going to work? Is playing gigs going to be able to buy you a house?
right.
Maybe, but can you count on it? And so I think as musicians, to be a jazz musician, you have to be a genius. That's what I've heard Jimmy Heath say, Benny Golson say. And I think that all of us who play jazz are smart enough to be able to do multiple things.
Mhm,
So, it doesn't hurt to plan and to think about how you're going to get what you want. And, to dig in and know the history. I hear a lot of people not really wanting to play the history.
oh,
And to get to, this, I've heard you play, and you play a lot of history. And to get
thank
to
you.
anything modern that's lasting and worthwhile, you have to go through the history. There's no avoiding that. It's like wanting to be a writer and not wanting to understand Shakespeare. You
Yeah,
you just kind of have to know about it and know where that's, even if you don't use it, you have to know. And that's maybe even not even the best metaphor, but yeah, instead of starting from the top down, which starting from current stuff down may inspire more people, which is cool.
mhm,
And I'm always an advocate for doing what inspires you. Just make sure you're going back. You're going all the way back and seeing where things came from and finding out the meaning of what you're playing.
that's very important. Well, I'd like to thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you. That was short. This guy could talk all day.
I also like to thank everyone at the Hyde Park Jazz Festival for facilitating these Tuesday talks, including our supportive viewership and festival attendees.
Yes.
Thanks again and have an amazing day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Peace.